Hey there. So I feel like this is going to be really important, and I'm kind of eager to record this. So before I even jump in the shower for the day, I'm sitting down to talk about this a bit. And maybe I'll have some more thoughts while I'm in the shower and I'll add on something at the end. But I just want to get this part out so I don't forget anything, when a lot of information is coming through and you just feel like you have to document it or get it out. I love when that happens in my journey, but also I definitely forget things. They kind of just leave me once I've processed through them, and I'm like, well, what was that? Like there are even stories that I'll tell in with clients that it's like I can only say how it happened. I can't even remember exactly what happened because when I integrate something, it just clears and it's gone and it's like not an issue anymore. And it's like I've collapsed that timeline so it doesn't even, like, my human brain can't even recall it. You know what I mean? So anyway, not all of them are like that, but some of them. So I just, in an interest of sharing this important point or this story, I want to do it this way. I do want to reference a clip from the last reading I did, the last Pick a Reflection reading I did on What Needs Your Love. There was a pile in there where I recognized something in myself. It was the last pile, the way I closed it out, what I said there. It's only vague right now. I can't even remember what I said. And there was something in the reading that alerted me to the fact that this reading might pertain to me as well. And so how I closed it was alerting me to a program that I had in myself. Okay? So let's reference that clip and then, and like I worked for that. I did that. I did that for myself. And so I think you too have had to stand in your truth, stand in your own energy amongst people, places, things that did not support you. And as a result, you know who you are. And so anything from the process that we've kind of touched on in this reading that felt like a pokey place, like there's something there, you're probably very, very well aware of it by now just through me talking about it. So you are able to kind of clean that up. And I saw for myself in this reading that there was one little spot where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is something that I can clean up too, one aspect of this process for myself where there was like a little straggler that hadn't been loved by me yet. So I love that we got to do this reading and look at this topic of, just like the challenges that we faced along the way. And then some of those challenges were faced before a time when we knew that challenges were opportunities. So there was like an old part of me that was just like still stuck in like a victimized state because of what had happened, when really that part of me just needed to be welcomed and loved so that it would join the wholeness of who I am. Who knows that that challenge was an opportunity for me to see my strength and to know my resilience and to have that perspective so that if I meet somebody along my journey who's stuck in that perspective, that I understand them and I can see them and I can hold space for them too. Before we talk about that clip, I want to talk about this. If you've had a session with me, or even sometimes if you've had a reading with me, you may have heard me talk about or reference or refer you to something called the 7 Essene mirrors. There's like a 2 or 3 hour YouTube video by Greg Braden on the 7 Essene mirrors. Now, Greg Braden is a geologist, spiritualist, who shares a lot of his wisdoms gained. He's traveled, talked to tribes, looked at ancient scrolls and documents that aren't widely known, and what he has to share, he's also directly correlated in some way with the Heart Math Institute. So if you're not familiar with their work, it's very important work, very helpful work. Understanding how that works will change your life if you don't know about it already. So I highly recommend looking into that. But like Greg Braden shares the 7 Essene mirrors, which is the Essenes were ancient wisdom keepers who passed along this knowledge to us. Now this video on YouTube is very old, and I came across it, I don't know, 7-8 years ago now, something like that. And when I did, I took it to heart because it rang true for me. I was early days of my, maybe like 2 to 3 years into my spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that. My journey of really realizing myself as a spiritual being. And what he said really inspired me to start taking responsibility. Not that I didn't want to take responsibility before. I always wanted to kind of work through and free myself from any limitation. When I found out I could, that's when I started doing it. Before that I was a victim and laying in bed and just succumbing to my suffering. But when I found out that I could make a difference, first through being introduced to the concept that the movie The Secret introduces, which was twice suggested to me by someone that I used to chat with back in the days. And it was first suggested, and then 2 years later, the same person suggested it again, and that's when I finally watched it. So it's interesting how 2 whole years had passed in between the time that he first suggested it and the time that I actually watched it, and it really changed my life. So it was like the universe wasn't giving up on me, but there were, time was moving a lot differently then. Information was moving a lot slower then. And so it's a lot speedier now, and we can make a lot of changes really fast now. So when I share this information, it could change your life if you take it to heart and you look into it and you utilize it. But it could also just inspire you to find your own way, because I don't necessarily say that you have to follow the same path I've followed. But anyway, at some point I was introduced to Greg Braden's The 7 Essene Mirrors, and I can't recall how I came about knowing or seeing this. Maybe it just came up in a YouTube feed, I don't know. I wasn't in the habit of watching YouTube regularly then, so I would think maybe it was a Facebook post by someone, I'm not sure. But when I watched it, I learned that there were 7 ways that people were mirroring ourselves back to us. And I was already alerted to and knowing about shadow work. I was already alerted to knowing that my beliefs were creating my reality. My thoughts were creating my reality, and that I was living out the energy that I was embodying. And so the concept of mirrors presented for me a way to see what was in myself, what was in my programming, because I very well also understood that the reason that I don't know what my programming is exactly is because it goes under the radar for us when it's in our subconscious. When our conscious mind is thinking, we're not aware of what our subconscious mind is doing, unless our conscious mind is actually looking at our subconscious mind, right? And that's not always the case. Sometimes we're doing other things, driving, cooking, having conversations, thinking about the past, thinking about the future. All of those are things that will take us away from introspection and looking at what we have in our subconscious. And even then, many of our subconscious programs actually are designed so that we don't notice them, so that we are protected from certain painful experiences that have happened in our lives, or that we were confused by, or that we deemed something that we want to avoid. So our subconscious is designed to protect us in a lot of ways. But when we are trying to change our lives, we have to actually look at what is in our subconscious when we're living it out, and it is happening below the level of awareness. Like we don't have control over what we're living out because we have not taken conscious awareness and control over what our energy is. And so that's what shadow work is, right? But like, you have to know what shadow to work on. So where do you notice your shadows? Well, I decided that I would always notice them in what I saw in other people. So I set up my own operating system to be such that when I noticed something I didn't like or that I judged in someone else, I looked for it in myself. If I didn't find it in myself, which I normally did find it in myself, but if I didn't find it myself, there were 6 other ways that that could be a mirror to me, right? And there were basic 3 that were the most common throughout my gist of the shadow work years. And so if it wasn't in something that was in me, it was probably something that I judged, something that I would like never do because I thought that it was bad, right? I judged it. And so even if you judge something, it will show up in your reality. So whatever's in your energy is showing up in your reality. So that's why we neutralize and 0 point energies. We find the understanding about it. We find the acceptance for its existence in order to neutralize any judgment we may hold about it. And that's how we escape the living out what we don't want to live out in our energy body, right? So the 7 Essene mirrors were so important to me because it allowed me to see what was in me. So I set out over the next 7-8 years to actually just do that, to use everything as a mirror, to learn about myself and to escape from anything that was unpleasant. So I came to a point where I got so clear in my energy that it was much easier to see what was mine, what was in here, and why I was operating the way I was. And it was like I had less need for a mirror, and I could notice my own self by introspecting. Like the step of finding it in a mirror wasn't as required anymore because I had trained myself in the process. And those steps, it's like they kind of became less and less needed in order for me to realize what was in my own energy, right? So I was able to be more present, meaning my conscious mind wasn't venturing off to the future as much, or thinking about the past as much, or distracted as much. So when I'm not distracted and I'm present, then I notice more of what is happening from my subconscious, right? So this was a lovely process, and I knew when I came to that point that I had to let go of those operating systems where I automatically look for the thing that I judge in somebody else, because it was like, I guess it wouldn't hurt to be looking for the thing I judge in somebody else if I don't find them, but it's also like a wasted step, right? It's like, well, why not just be present and live my life from my own perspective without having to find a reflection anymore, because now, a lot of that work is done. So wonderful. So I'm going through life in a peaceful manner and, just still doing my practical things and still like happy to follow my spiritual guidance and my inner prompts and listening to my intuition and practicing with it a lot to utilize it for my own good and the good of others. And, generally just working out any kinks that come up in my ability to enjoy life, to be happy or whatever, to face challenges. So, some of you may have watched the video where I showed how to balance out some energy, and I used myself as the example, and what the example was that I was having some need for car repairs, and I had put it off because I realized that I had some trauma around trusting a mechanic. So I worked through that in one of my videos. I forget what it's called now, but I'm going to find what it is and put it up on the screen now in text in case you want to look at it. But if I forget, please send me a comment so that I can edit this or add it in the comments. So I was happy to have realized that in myself, right? That there was a hidden shadow in myself that I was fearing, trusting somebody. I was expecting things weren't going to work out for me, right? Based on past experience. So I had to neutralize and release that fear. So I did that. And I was at the point where my car was being repaired. So there were different stages where first I put the car into the mechanic and got the brakes changed, which was rather expensive because, I needed all the brakes done. And so I did that, and then another 3 weeks passed while I saved some money in order to get the next chunk of work done on my car. So the next chunk would have finished it up, and then I could get it inspected and be legal. And it was going to be such a relief to me, right? I was looking forward to it and so happy that I had conquered this challenge in my life, So at some point, I was ready to get the car into the shop, and someone else mentioned to me that they could do the work and that they were out of work. So they could really use the money. If I was interested in saving some money, they would do it for cheaper than the mechanic. And what needed to be done was definitely stuff they could do. I didn't necessarily need a mechanic to do what needed to be done next, because it was even stuff that I could have done. In fact, I had my muffler had fallen off at some point, and I had actually been under my car and tying up my muffler and creating a patch kit on the weld that needed to be done, and so I knew that because I could do it, that I knew someone else could do it. I had also gained a few pounds since I had been under my car, so I was happy to let someone else do it because I didn't know about crawling under my car at where I was at now. So so I said, okay, yeah, that would be fine, but I also didn't want to pay this person less, because I thought, it's totally fine. It'll be harder for this person to do it without a lift. I'm going to pay them what I plan to pay the mechanic. It turned out that the car repair process needed a couple extra parts that I hadn't planned on, that the mechanic hadn't told me to buy. And that was to the tune of about, I don't know, $80 or $100. So I bought those in the process, and that was fine. I just faced the challenges as they came, and didn't let it be the end of the world or whatever, and was thankful that I was in a position to be able to handle those challenges financially. And then, after the repairs were all done and the car was taken on its little test drive, it was discovered that the brakes, which was the job that I had done 3 weeks prior, the brake fluid had actually sprayed out of the back brake, and that was not what the work was being done on, so there was no real reason for it other than the pressure of being put on the ramp, caused it to cause some damage to happen, which, the repair should have held up to being put on a ramp, certainly. So, I was not in a financial position to then take care of that issue. It turned out to be the caliper, which is about $100 part. And I knew I would need a mechanic to fix this next part, because the person that I had doing the repairs for the second round was not equipped to do this particular issue. So I took it in stride, and I was so, actually present with the process of realizing the issue, taking the challenge in stride, and also realizing that issue actually, I actually ended up having gratitude for that happening, because I was even brought to the thought in my mind how if that hadn't happened on the ramp, that it could have happened on the highway, that my brakes could have gave way on the highway, and that would have been very dangerous and scary, and who knows what could have happened. So I cried with gratitude at some point that could have saved my life. and was just like, okay, back to the drawing board of saving some money up for the next chunk of repairs. And I was noticeably taking my challenge in stride, and I noticed also that it was in contrast to the past version of me who may have felt very defeated and victimized by that happening, right? And I was like really happy for myself in noticing the progress I had obviously made, in that I no longer took that as like the end of the world, or like, am I ever going to come to the end of this challenge, or like I knew it was going to go bad for me, or whatever, It was just like, no, like this actually is something that is just part of life, and it's another challenge that I can certainly face, and it's like not out of reach for me to deal with this challenge. So, moving on to dealing with the challenge. Great. I also knew that actually happening in my life was a correlation to an energy that I was carrying. But I didn't know what energy it was, because my conscious mind has like a mantra that says, things are happening for me. So I knew it was happening for me, which was evidenced by my thought that, oh, this could have actually saved my life, right? Well, fast forward to now, where I'm in the process of saving up for the brake repair. And I'm realizing what that was showing me, why that happened. Why did another repair have to be done after 2 years of waiting to have car repairs done on my car and get it legal, and finally I'm just about there to the finish line, and then something else breaks and sets me back a couple weeks or so. So I was just like, okay, like even though I'm taking it in stride, I know it correlates to something. Didn't know what. Now I'm realizing what, because I had a dream last night. And my dream last night talked about, well, I'll just tell you the story. I was in a thrift store, which is, a thrift store is semi-local to here, has this 10-cent sale, where every other week, one certain color of tickets is marked down to 10 cents. So they try to clear the store out of those colored tickets. And I was at this sale in my dream, and I was there late in the day, so it felt like things were picked over. But I was finding things that I wanted for 10 cents, and so happy to find these good bargains. And then I found a painting. And paintings isn't something I usually buy or anything, but like, it was 10 cents, and I decided I wanted it. It still had, it wasn't exactly a painting, it was more like it was on metal, right? Like, it was more like it was a painting, but it was on metal. It was like a decoration for a house or something, but it was also in its original packaging from the store, which was like just a little bit of piece of cardboard on the edges, So it had its ticket, which was a pink, and it said $3.99, so that's what they were selling it for, except for the 10-cent sale was going on, so I could get it for 10 cents. And the original price on it was double the $3.99. It was like $8.99 or something like that. So this is the kind of, decoration it was. It wasn't like anything too fancy, right? It was an $8 decoration, which was now at the thrift store for 10 cents. And for some reason, I had to wait in my dream to check out. So there was a waiting area. So I'm waiting in the waiting area, and then finally it's my turn. And by the time I get to check out, I forgot that it was 10 cent sale. And I end up paying the $3.99 that's on the tag. And I don't remind the cashier that it's 10 cent sale because I forgot completely myself too. And something feels off about it when I'm paying it. And I decide to, like, look at my receipt a little bit after I leave or whatever. And after I leave, I realize, oh, it was 10-cent sale. I was supposed to pay 10 cents for this. But I'm already gone. Like, I'm already left the store or whatever. And then, there's this moment of weighing. It's like, well, do I go back to the store? Well, it's like, it's just a few bucks, and, the store's a little bit of a distance from where I live, so it would be like a lot to go back there for a couple bucks. And then I just said, well, you win some and you lose some. And then I woke up. And then, so it's fresh in my mind, and it's always important to have documentation of your dreams when they're fresh in your mind, just so you know if you're going to analyze dreams, which is a very, very effective way of getting information about your subconscious, by the way. So what I realized, though, right away, without even having to dissect this dream very much, and there was probably more to dissect in there, but what I realized right away was that I had a belief, you win some, you lose some. And it was, of course, contradictory to my conscious belief, which was, it's all happening for me, not to me. Because the same thing as the end of the clip that I showed, where, I showed that I did not have the belief that it's all happening for us. I had the belief that sometimes things were going wrong, right? And, like, even if things go different than expected, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And if I have one belief consciously that says it's all happening for me, and then I have a subconscious belief that says you win some, you lose some, those beliefs are butting heads, right? Like, it's like one's coming in this way, one's coming in this way, and it's like, well, the universe is gonna, have to give me a bit of both. So, in realizing that, I was just like, oh, okay, so how beautiful to find that out, right? Because, like, I'm about to step into another, part of my life. I'm closing out cycles. And, of course, I want to close out the cycle where I think I win some and I lose some. And over the years, there have been smaller ways that this has played out in my life, right? Like, just small ways where I win some and I lose some. And it's kind of funny to think how I didn't even have to live that out, if I had just realized it. But also, it's not wrong that I did. Because I've had a lot of life experience, right? I know what it's like to so-called lose. And the only thing that could have been anchoring that belief in, for me, for it to not to have been totally overridden by my conscious belief, was any emotions from the times that I lost that hadn't yet been processed through. So this allows me to go and meditate and sit with any of those emotions and ask myself, are there any feelings that I haven't been present with about having lost over the years, over the times where I felt frustrated or thwarted or like it wasn't fair, all those feelings that go along with those things. Because obviously this belief is a coping mechanism that was lodged in me at a much earlier time, before I understood that everything is happening for me. Before I understood that everything's happening for me, I thought that I understood that sometimes things happen for you and sometimes things happen against you. I really thought that. So that's what my belief was. You win some, you lose some. And there were feelings, human feelings, reactionary feelings, responsive feelings to losing some that were not yet processed because my mind just said, shrug it off. Maybe that's what I was taught as a child, like, shrug it off, It's like when you see a child fall and skin his knee and, like, the dad says, well, suck it up. It's like, no, actually, Dad, you don't know that you're causing a trauma to be lodged in your child's energy body for them to repeat and live out again and again until they fully understand that you don't have to shrug it off, that you actually have to be present with your feeling. That's it. Accept that it's there, be present with it, let it pass through. Or shrug it off, ignore it, and let it knock on your door until it gets your attention finally loud and clear. With like a knee injury that, makes you lose your leg later in life. Like, I'm not exaggerating. Like you can, you will live out the energy that you lodge within yourself by not allowing it to flow through, by lodging resistance in your system. And I'm not like saying it always has to play out that way. I'm just using that as an extreme example of how it could work. Okay. And the reason why I'm using an extreme example is because it is a serious thing. Like, this is literally how it works. Like, we do need to be careful. We do need to take care, I want to say, when we are programming our children. Children will learn to do what we do, not what we say. So it's not that the child is learning to shrug it off because we said shrug it off. No, the child is learning to shrug it off because we shrugged it off. Okay? All right, moving on. Now, there was another point that I wanted to make about this. Let's see if I've come around to full circle on this topic. Yes. So by being present with any emotion that I have lodged in my system about having lost some, I can neutralize the energy, neutralize that program, and then live with my conscious understanding as an integrated thing, which is that, things are happening for me. And, even this happened for me, because had I gone on to the next part of my life, right, begun something new, and I had the belief that you win some, you lose some, I am setting myself up for losing. How is my new beginning going to start if I have in my operating system, in my foundational data from operating, that I could lose, that I will lose some, and that I will win some. Like, that is not how I have to live my life now that I have released that belief, because it was lodged in me at a time before I understood the reality, which is that I'm just going to live out what my program is. So I want to eliminate anything from my program that causes me to lose, of course. I don't need to lose. Even when something doesn't go as I wanted it to, it does not mean that I'm losing. It simply means that it's happening for me. So I just have to look at why it's happening for me. And if I don't know immediately why, it will be revealed to me if I ask. Ask and you shall receive of the universe. And this is how I figured this out as well. Because when it happened and I took it in stride with my brake repair issue, I did ask the universe. I said, well, what is this showing me about what's in me? Like, why did this happen? And I was shown why this happened, because I carried that belief that was not true. It wasn't true. So that's why I can change it, right? All right. So yeah, I thought I wanted to share that because it just, for one thing, it shows the evolution of how I've operated with my programming and untangled what programming I was living out, first by using my mirrors, and then by just being self-aware and being present with myself at each step, and then realizing very easily when I'm not present. Like, if something happens and I wasn't kind of like present with it, then I know there's something that I can understand about it. And that means I can ask a question, and that means the answer will be given, and that means I can gain understanding that I need. Now, of course, this does have to do with asking the right questions, right? For all I know, there's another question about the issue that I didn't ask, and until I ask it, I won't know. But what I do know is that if something arises in my experience that I don't understand, I will ask. So I'm pretty comfortable with what happens next. I'm not going to carry fear about missing out on some aspect of whatever I was supposed to understand, because I do believe it's unfolding as it should. Like, I'm taking this as a fresh perspective change, a fresh, clean slate right into my new beginning. then my new beginning will not include losing. That's pretty cool, right? Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to go enjoy a shower, maybe do some editing on this particular video so that I can share it with you. Let me know what you think. What are you figuring out in your life? What is coming to realization? What tools have you utilized in order to get where you are? I'd love to hear about it and talk about it.